It is clear that the FOIA law never contemplated the complexities of protecting privacy in a video and audio recordings like with the body-worn camera. The body-worn cameras record almost every single thing that an officer sees and hears. Therefore, the videos will capture a much broader range of information, from faces and voices, vehicles involved on the scene, private documents, confidential phone calls, personal phone numbers, even passwords.
That's the police chief of the District of Columbia, Kathy Lanier, making the case that the video from the police body cameras should not be made public on a practical basis, and that is causing some concerns at some quarters. A person who's been covering that story is our good friend Paul Wagner from Fox 5. Good morning to you, Paul.
Morning, Brian and Larry.
All right, so what's going on? It seems like the mayor and the police chief are all in favor of keeping the police cam video sort of private, and then a lot of other people, including quite a few reporters, are saying, wait a minute. What purpose does it serve to have the cameras if we can't look at the video?
Well, the interesting dynamic here, I think, in the few weeks that I've been covering this, is that the mayor and the chief seem to be on an island here, and they're the ones that want to keep it mostly private, where you've got the Fraternal Order of Police that wants it open, the ACLU, the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press wants it open. At this hearing the other day, there were even some academics that were there who were saying that this video should be available to the public. What the chief is saying is that it's an onerous process to have to go and digitize some of these images so that the video would then be released to the public. And she gave what seemed to me to be an extreme example of a domestic incident that was recreated by the police department, an actual incident that they used actors and they refilmed to show that in order to release this video, you'd have to digitize what was on a prescription bottle, the faces of individuals, even pictures inside a house, because people that might know this family would recognize the inside of the house. So it's a situation now where they're going to have to come up with language that's going to satisfy everybody, and that may be very difficult to do.
Well, we were just talking to our legal analyst, Joe DeGeneva, about that, and I said, well, what if when you enter the house on a domestic, there's no expectation of privacy on a public street, but when you go into somebody, he says, look, if the police are in there, they're on there in official business, they have the right to be there. It is then a public event. It seems to me that I don't understand all this need to digitize video when you're talking about police going who are acting on behalf of the government. All we're asking for is accountability, and if you don't get the video, you don't have the accountability.
Sure, and in some of the videos that have been released by MPD, official videos, in one in particular that I did use in one of my stories, this officer stops a car, they digitize the face of the person that he pulled over and some other information, and then he turns around and walks away, and this guy walks up to him, a panhandler, and he wants some money from the officer so he could go get something to eat. Well, even in that video, they digitized that man's face.
Why?
And there was no need for that, because it's a public street, a public event. You have no right to privacy while you're out there on the street. So it seems to me as if the chief is using these examples because she believes it's going to be an onerous process to go and have to digitize all this stuff before it's released to the public. Now, what it might come down to is just money, that they need editors. They'll need to hire people to take care of this process so that anything that is FOIA'd and is releasable is released under the language of the law, whatever that is.
I wonder if anyone would point out to Chief Lanier that it was onerous and expensive to hire actors to recreate a domestic call, but that's a whole other story. I do have reservations here because my understanding here is, Paul, that we want the body cameras on, so if there's any question about an improper stop or God forbid what happened with Michael Brown and Ferguson, then we can then go to the video to prove what happened. But by then also saying, and by the way, any encounter with the police is now going to be publicly available to anyone who asks for it for whatever reason. I would think that because of certain privacy issues, be it a sexual assault report or maybe a domestic assault report, a victim might be hesitant to pick up that phone knowing that there's going to be a camera in her house and now it's going to be available for all the world to see. I mean, won't that sort of put a quash on some people reporting issues to the police?
Well, that's a very good point, and Councilmember McDuffie has pointed that out, and that there may be certain cases in which that would be off limits totally, and that's a possibility. Certain types of cases. So it's all going to be in the language and how it's written out, and whether or not you can find a common ground. One thing I want to point out is that Delroy Burton, the president of the police union, is very much in favor of making these videos available to the public because he believes it shows and will show what his officers go through and how they encounter people out on the street. And so he's a very big proponent for this, and that's one of the things I find most interesting.
I don't doubt it. And also, by the way, I think it will make people behave a little bit better when they're interacting with the police because they'll know that it's on video.
Well, I know for a fact that one of the officers who was wearing one of these body cameras in the pilot program, he got into some kind of an interaction in which he used some very foul language, and the superiors, his supervisors, looked at that video and determined that what he did was wrong, and they actually suspended him for a day. I actually spoke with the officer about it. So it works a couple of different ways here.
All right, so how's this going to be resolved? You got the mayor and the police chief on one side, and it seems like virtually everybody else on the other side.
Well, I think it comes down to the language that Councilmember McDuffie comes up with, and where it stands on the city council. How many council members are going to agree with that language? I asked him the other day if he'd done a head count, and I didn't really get a straight answer from him as to where that stands. So we don't really know at this point where the rest of the council stands, and it may be until they read this language and see this language before we really understand where it goes.
If the mayor and the police chief, prevail here, will there be any lawsuits filed by reporter groups, etc.?
Well, I can't predict that, but I wouldn't doubt it. Trying to find some kind of openness here, and keep in mind this is in a city where you cannot get mugshots. The police will not release mugshots to you, and all of the police channels are encrypted. So we can't listen to what's going on in the city, and we can't get mugshots. And yet we're all arguing here over whether or not video recorded by the police should be released to the public.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you drive down the street, and your image is captured 1,000 times by the license plate readers and by street cameras and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
but an interaction with a police officer is listen, we've all had interactions with cops at various times and various reasons, and it's not always a pleasant experience. I don't know if I would want every conversation I've had with a police officer made available to somebody like Paul Wagner to be able to grab.
How many have you had, Larry?
The last thing I want is Wagner doing an expose on O'Connor's talking to the police. I know how you guys can be at Fox 5.
All right. Well, listen, Paul, stay abreast of it. We'd love to have you back when there's a more definitive answer.
Sure, guys. I'm going to stay on top of it.
Thanks, Paul. And just kidding. It's Tucker's the one I'm suspicious of over there, Tucker Barnes. All right, we'll continue following the camera story here in D.C. because it's getting interesting.